right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. We have a lot to talk about during this meeting, and specifically we wanted to address some concerns about the regulation process and just clarify some of the things that we have to do with that, including the two different comment periods. So that's going to be a big part of the conversation. We also wanted to talk about some future meetings to discuss our phase 2 regulations. And without further ado, I'm going to kick it to, is it Shannon or Sarah who's going to do the presentation?
We're going to work our combination in, but I'm going to immediately move over into the housekeeping, and that is to ask everyone respectfully to go onto mute right now so that we don't get any feedback from anyone, and to ensure that we don't have any disruptions. We ask also that if you are an advisory council, this is the perfect time to add your name to the chat so we have that in our recording, and please include your affiliation. I know there's some folks that when they log in, they have difficulty with their name on there, so please make sure to include your affiliation. And then when we do take any breaks, please make sure that you raise your hand. If you're part of the public, we have reserved 10 minutes at the end for you to provide your feedback. This is a general approximate timeline, but we want to just go through this really quickly. We have an hour to go through everything with you all, and we want to make sure we provide that public comment period at the very end. So really wanted to provide everyone the opportunity to understand specifically what the process is in developing a regulation in Maryland from the time in which the law becomes adopted and it goes through the full regulatory process. In order for a rule to be developed, there is a large stage here indicated on the left-hand side, which I have affectionately referred to here as the collection development stage. And that really is the process that we have facilitated relative to the advisory councils in many of the previous meetings, almost every single one. We're on our 23rd now, and we've done a lot of facilitation on these online meetings and solicited a lot of public comments and feedbacks during that period of time on the drafts. Along that, there's also the draft regulation development that internally we have to assess and develop and then review with our attorney general. And that can take, at a minimum 6 months, and honestly goes sometimes years in the process. From that point, if there is a specific impact to small businesses, there is a requirement that a proposed regulation draft be published on MDE's website. And those who are signed up to receive those notifications would receive notification and would be able to provide commentary on the proposed regulatory structure or even proposed outline associated with a regulation. And that's the 15-day small business review period. Those have regulatory frameworks and statutory obligations as far as those timelines are concerned. Once that ends, there is a 15-day requirement from when a draft regulation is submitted to the AELR, which they get to review the information at a minimum prior to it being published in the Maryland Register. That takes approximately 18 or more days for the DSD to review the action to make sure it aligns with their architecture and ensure that we have not put forth anything that has concerns. There's sometimes back and forth. It's an approximation, but relatively about 20 days. And then that would be when it would be published in the Maryland Register and is open for public comment period. And so we're kind of in this period now. We're approaching that public comment period once the notice is placed in the Maryland Register. Under the public comment period, it is a finite, statutorily defined as a 30-day public comment period. When that closes, that is when it would be internally reviewed. The department may require follow-ups to those responses to comments, and then we would then go ahead and propose our final action. That does not have a determined time. And so typically, unless there is a required effective date or a statutorily obligated effective date, there can be a big difference in this period of time to when it then goes to the secretary to adopt that proposed regulation. They approximately have about 15, give or so, days to review that. And then it would be published in the Maryland Register as a final action. That takes a little over a week. And then once that occurs, there's another week and a half before those regulations become effective. We feel like we hadn't properly explained this process to the advisory council prior to this. And if you had not been involved in any regulatory development with the department prior to this, it may have appeared that we had provided only a 50-day public comment period for those regulations. We wanted to make sure that we gave full transparency and education on this so that no one felt that they were being slighted during the holiday season. These were under constraints that we sometimes don't have oversight on, especially when we are submitting documents and then they get approved and they move forward outside of our agency itself. And Sarah?
Yeah, I'll take over here. So we also just wanted to give everyone kind of a refresher around what we have accomplished to date and make it clear where we're situated now as we move forward with these meetings into future topics. And I know there are a lot of people potentially on this meeting who are new. We got a lot of new email sign up requests, which is really great. Happy to have anyone here who's new. So to date, we've hosted 22 meetings. This is our 23rd meeting online. We have also we did an in-person discussion around the covered materials list at Arundel Mills Mall. And that was just a really key discussion, a really key opportunity for everyone to come together and talk about what's important in Maryland. And after that, we accepted stakeholder written comments, and those are posted on our webpage. And then early in 2025, the needs assessment was completed. That's also posted on our webpage. So we've had a lot of discussion to date. We're really looking forward to moving into this new year and on upcoming topics. So situating ourselves as we look into the future, these next two upcoming dates, July 1st, 2027 and July 1st, 2028, are kind of the key upcoming topics that will require a lot of focus. But as we look forward at the entire schedule, we're also looking all the way into 2034 and beyond. So July 1st, 2027 is when MDE needs to publish our statewide list of covered materials that are recyclable and compostable through curbside recycling. Then in July 1st, 2028, the pro or the individual producer responsibility plans are due. And then this no sale distribution import without a plan on file, there is not a date, but there is a requirement in law that after a certain date, producers can't sell or distribute or import without having a plan on file. And so this is kind of a placeholder date. There's nothing that has been officially approved in regulation or anything like that, but this is kind of an estimate here. We're imagining that it'll be sometime around the fourth quarter in 2028. And then in 2029, service providers seeking reimbursements must register with MDE. That's at the beginning of 2029. Mid 2029 in July, annual reports are due to MDE. And then looking pretty far out into 2033. I apologize for that typo there. An additional nonprofit can be considered as a pro. And then eventually we'll be redoing the process of conducting a recycling needs assessment for the state.
So with this, we'd like to kind of open up the floor to the advisory council for them to kind of express concerns they have about the timeline that we've shared up until now, and then also the process for regulations, and to really to hear from you if you have concerns or questions on the timeline process itself, from the regulation, from development of the law enactment all the way through to regulation, or if you have concerns as far as the timeline that Sarah just shared.
Shannon, I think the timeline is reasonable. I think it's everybody's intent, to get this right and make sure it's actionable. But I mean, just at first glance, it seems reasonable, in my opinion.
Go ahead, Jazz.
Yeah, just a quick comment. Y'all got a lot on your hands. And frankly, I think y'all are doing a great job. But it's just a lot to do in the next. As a former EPA employee, I appreciate some of the time strains you're operating under, and I appreciate the job y'all are doing.
Thank you very much. Well, we are only about 15 minutes into the conversation, but we're moving along really quickly unless anyone has any other feedback they want to provide. And so the next thing we want to do is move into what we're considering for the input from the advisory council for the next round of regulations. And again, going through that same timeline process that we showed before, where things take at a minimum a year from the point of where we are submitting the draft to our Attorney General's office all the way through it getting adopted and enacted. That time frame, we're looking here at potentially the mid of 2027, somewhere month leading up to the mid-year of 2027 for that to be completed. And so therefore we kind of have a condensed period of time once again, where we are looking to provide this to be drafted and sent over to our Attorney Generals by the mid of this year, by no later than the mid of this year. And so what we were trying to accomplish here is looking at what we think are necessary as far as potentially necessary as far as a framework for this next regulatory structure. And the topics we think that might be most useful to hear from the advisory council on their opinions of, and especially on their suggestions or recommendations, are these three topics. Those three topics are based off of the survey that we provided to the council, talking with other states about things that they felt were important to discuss in their own advisory councils, if there's a state that already is in this process or has completed this process, speaking with the EPA, and then in other participations that we have with national calls. And so the focus that we are considering right now is obviously the minimum curbside recycling list, as that needs to be published by the 2027. And then the producer responsibility plans, as CAA would need to be able to and individual producer responsibility plans, because those folks would also need to be providing those by no later than 2028. So setting up a foundation of minimum requirements and statutorily regulatory requirements that we may need to support, and then addressing refill and recycling, reuse, because that is a topic that we really haven't provided much specific responses to in Maryland in any of the previous advisory council meetings, but haven't settled on that topic. So we wanted to be transparent and give you time in your analysis of what you can provide as far as feedback, commentary, resources, etc., on those three topics. And so wanted to give you that heads up prior to our upcoming meetings. And then to let you know kind of the framework where we're trying to ask questions. Maryland does not anticipate putting the curbside list in a regulation itself. It is a long process, and therefore any time that we would have to make a change or iteration to it, it would be quite cumbersome. And so we are thinking along the lines of publishing it on our website. However, in that publication, we are considering things like, what is that list refresh? How should we do that refresh? How would that impact infrastructure and funding, the frequency? Most important, in Maryland, we are different from any other state that has this type of law in the respect that our recycling processing infrastructure and sortation infrastructure is both public and private. When we inquire to the other states, they have all private infrastructure. And so, and Chaz, I'm going to give you a nod on that. I know you repeated this over and over again in previous advisory council meetings, so want to make sure to reiterate that to folks that are new and joining us. Maryland has separation of both public and private infrastructure. And as such, when we are looking at things such as reimbursements for the curbside list, how are those going to be managed and mitigated? Reimbursement, funding, and what is that plan? So we want to fully have opinions and responses from the advisory council on that. And then we would also like to understand where the minimum curbside list aligns with any pro-organized alternative collection. As far as the producer responsibility plans, actually, before I forget to comment on this, on the minimum curbside recycling list, again, Maryland is very has a diverse infrastructure set. When we go to Western Maryland, the Eastern Shore, curbside collection per the needs assessment and the waste characterization, we saw that there is both drop off curbside and a variety of different mechanisms in which these materials are collected throughout the state. So what does curbside essentially mean is also something we wanted to get feedback on from the advisory council. And then for the producer responsibility plans, we were curious what the advisory council felt were needing to be at a minimum requirements in this iteration of regulation. How often should their plans be refreshed or amended? Is this something that should be defined in regulation? Because right now there's a little bit of ambiguity in the environmental article, and we wanted to get some feedback on that. And then one of the comments within 92505, the environmental article, it talks about agreements of responsibility for coverage, and we'd really like for the advisory council to take a look at that article and see what your thoughts are as far as if there should be something in regulation that should be recommended for adoption. And I'm going to pause here and see if anyone wants to, the advisory council wants to provide any feedback specifically on these topics, or if there's something that you felt was more pressing in that next 3 to 6 month time frame for us to be drafting. Go ahead, Peter.
Shannon, sorry, just a quick clarification. Sorry, just on, I didn't quite get the difference in Maryland. Sorry, is infrastructure is both private and public? Wouldn't that be the same in Colorado? Like,
So
just sorry,
yeah.
I just wanted a clarity on if I'm missing something.
Yeah, sure. So we reached out to all of the states that have an existing EPR packaging law and made a point to saying how many of your MRFs are publicly versus privately operated. And according to everyone that was on that call, including Colorado, who was in attendance, they indicated that there is not a state that has this law with effective regulations that have a MRF operating by the public, publicly funded, not just privately funded. If we're incorrect, but that was what we received.
No, you're spot on. I think we're the only state in the country where there's more publicly operated MRFs than private sector MRFs, which makes it even more fun.
Yeah,
Peter, did you
I guess you're going to get some differences, right? Like you're going to have some potential nuances in there, right? You've got a not-for-profit that's operating on a municipality's behalf in Colorado. You've also got some degree. You potentially have some facilities, maybe not a MRF, but you might have densifiers and things like that that are used by a municipality. So Yeah, there's some nuances there, I think, but I think some of the so some of this thinking has happened to some degree.
Yeah, and this is and because we'll want to dive into this a lot more when we have that specific meeting on this. We definitely wanted everyone to have the opportunity to like think about this and start to develop your questions or concerns. But these are generally what we were trying to achieve in the upcoming calls is what are the potential concerns on reimbursement for a publicly operated MRF, and what would that mean? So if the curbside list, and again, I'm going to give an example here at the most broadest way, but in Baltimore County, one of the older MRFs, it's publicly operated. If our curbside list included something, the minimum list on there that was not something that Baltimore County currently accepts, what is the process in which Baltimore County would receive funding to support that collection of those materials through producer responsibility support? Would it be a reimbursement, and how would that reimbursement work for tax funded infrastructure, constituent tax funded infrastructure? If that's helpful to give one example comparatively to a privately operated entity who can forecast, prepare, etc. And I'll also indicate that the curbside list is, and I'm gonna circle back on that just because it's on the timeline. It is a statewide list for covered materials that are recyclable and compostable through curbside. And so again, we'll want to bring into those discussions compostability in the minimum curbside list discussion. Go ahead, Mike.
No, I just wanted to add that this is very helpful. Approaching these things in chunks will allow people to really think through it as we make progress. The key here is that, this level of transparency is going to be needed as we try to support the regulatory construction that you guys are doing. So this is very helpful. And then making sure that people have time to think through it as you roll out the timeline for when we will engage and discuss, so that we can, move, make progress with people, committing collectively to really support the process. So that's very good, really commendable on the work you guys are doing.
Thanks, Mike. Moving along, we wanted to kind of set up the at least the next couple of meetings so that we provide everybody the opportunity to hold their calendars as they possibly can. We know some of these are coming up shortly, and so we fully understand that this timeline is quite aggressive. As we indicated, we're trying to establish and have this draft. We hope that we can have additional meetings after this to provide a fully circular and robust discussion, but we wanted to at least start with establishing plans for the next one. So we've set up a February 10th from 9 to 11 Eastern Standard Time meeting for, we'll be discussing the curbside list, and then we anticipate our discussion will be on the pro plans for February 20th from 8:30 to 10:30 a.m. And then on March 3rd from 1 to 3, we anticipate discussion on refill reuse. We would definitely like to incorporate Maryland-based reuse as well as nationwide discussions. If there is someone that is attending this meeting that would like to share or highlight something specific to these calls, please do reach out to our MDE at EPR email address that you have all been connected on to indicate your thoughts. We definitely want to have the most robust discussions, but also want to have them from the point of education and insight as to how we can develop these regulations. Go ahead, Peter.
Shannon, maybe something to consider for the discussion on reuse refill. Can we get a company that's existing, like one that provides water jugs for people, or something that's operating within the state across board? That would be helpful to sort of get their perspective as to where they see this a plan fitting in.
Yeah, that's a great recommendation. We have contacts with some reuse refill entities that exist in the state, such as Our World and Dispatch Goods, but water refill bottle would be another one that would be useful and helpful to have as insight into this discussion.
And sorry, Shannon, so Our World is kind of like an emerging type of one that's coming up. I'm just thinking more about a more established system that might be in place already, maybe operating on a smaller scale, but something more established, just because I know that there's, things that we're maybe looking to increase, but I'm also thinking about those systems that we don't want to potentially hinder that are already operational.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I probably should have indicated. So Our World does have a wash facility in Maryland, down in Prince George's County, and Dispatch Goods operates the same infrastructure in Anne Arundel County right now. And Abigail, so that actually, it's a really good question. I'm going to read it out loud because I don't know if you can come off mute or not. Abigail asked if we could get a preview of the curbside list ahead of the February 10th meeting. And I think, and I don't want to, I definitely want Brad and Sarah to jump in here on this discussion, but on behalf of MDE, but I don't know that we were necessarily establishing the list itself, but more or less establishing the framework in which the list exists.
Yes, that is correct. And our due date for the list is July 1st, 2027. So we have some time. Again, this is more, and Shannon, if you can go back to the slide which kind of showed those items, which showed the things that we wanted to talk about. There were like sub bullets under the curbside list, whatever that, yeah, that one right there. So we're not, again, as Shannon had mentioned, we're not proposing to put the list in regulation, because if we want to make changes, that is a brutal process. And we just need to be a little bit more flexible as technology and comes online. And there's already a process to establish the list in statute, but when we're talking with the team, there may be things that we might have to clarify or consider in the development of that list. So again, it's not the list itself, it's adding on to the framework that already exists in statute.
Abigail, do you have a follow-up on that? Okay. It's 2:30. This is Friday afternoon. I'm pretty excited. I gotta admit this, guys, that we can move on to the public comment period. So with that, I will please raise your hand so we can call on you, but I will leave this open for public comment now. Go ahead, Justin.
Hey, just real quick, appreciate all the information today. Just want to point out, like, we're getting very close to these deadlines, and once again, the compost industry does not have a representative on the council. We're very eager, the Maryland DC compost chapter, to have representation, and would look forward to hopefully having that in the future.
Yeah, and Shin, I do want to jump in on that. I did want to give an update. So we have, I think we have 5 applicants right now. We've essentially established a process internally on how to vet those. As you all know, we no longer have a cap on we no longer have a cap statutorily on the members, but we are proposing a slightly higher one in regulation, and we have gone through that process and given that to our senior leadership, and we're hoping to to meet and make final decisions very soon. I do recognize that it's been a long process, but we've reviewed the process with senior leadership and the candidates. Now it's just taking it to the secretary's level at that point. Because in statute, it's the secretary that makes the decision on those.
And Justin, I want to make sure that you are fully aware that when it comes to the preparation for regulations and public comments and all of those that are received through the 15-day public comment period and 30-day public comment period, regardless of whether someone's on the advisory council or not, those are all received and reviewed at the same level, regardless of who submitted those. So all of those comments should still be coming in, regardless of whether someone's on the advisory council or not. That's the piece that we really and truly use to helps facilitate any integration into regulations, in addition to the discussions we have during the advisory council. And intentionally, the public comment period is always open at the end of every meeting. So I don't want you to know, I don't want you to it appear that it's falling on deaf ears. We're definitely interested, engaged, hoping you'll provide feedback and comments. We received yours during the 15-day public comment period. We want to keep hearing more. Mel, do you want to go?
Yeah, hi everyone. Melissa Young with Upstream. Shannon, I just had a clarifying question about the comment you made about allowing people to come and share their thoughts and ideas at these meetings on the different topics. Is that something, Upstream does a lot of work with reuse and refill in EPR across the country? Is that something that are you saying there's a possibility we could come and give like a short presentation? Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to make sure I tried to go off mute instead I moved the slides backwards. Yes, that's exactly what we're getting at. And the same, Justin, thinking about what you had just shared, I think that it may behoove potentially someone in the composting industry to share respective to what is compostable and certified compostability may also be useful and helpful for the curbside list. Just as another, as you were talking and thinking through this, that might be useful and helpful as well.
Shannon, just a quick comment. Maybe, Justin, I know this is the second time you've asked for this. Would that be something you in particular would be willing to share with this group at some point, regardless of anything about what is happening in composting? I know I've seen you a couple of times on that. Is that something you'd be willing to do as well?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to represent, like I said, the Maryland composters here as part of the USCC chapter and offer anything we can do to help the process. I mean, I think our group is very eager for the opportunity that this is going to provide, and just want to make sure that, we get to be part of crafting what it becomes.
Over to you, Shannon and team, so that's a good thing. Maybe we can get them in at some point to share some of their expertise.
And before we close off the public comment period, I just want to make sure I go back to Abigail Stein, mentioned that, I'm sorry you have a living baby, but again, congratulations on that baby. But that the known listen here, a reminder of the known list that might be the framework would be helpful. Just anything to help with reactions would be helpful. And I think that I'm going to go back to that slide because I want to, again, really dive into what we're planning on, in our minds, kind of interpreting some of the things that we're trying to understand is what is considered curbside in Maryland. Like, is curbside me and my house and the curb? But if I live in Western Maryland and there is no collection at my curb and I have to bring it from my house to a transfer station, is that the curb? Is the transfer station the curb? And so we're trying to look at that, the specific to Maryland and Maryland's infrastructure, and to protect all the Marylanders within the state as far as what the intention of the producer's responsibility is described in law, what can we do to address that? And again, when it comes to that public and private infrastructure, we went into that a little bit more. As far as the framework for list refresh, just like in the advisory council, how in our draft regulations, we, provided a bit of a framework on how the advisory council obtains memberships and what that means when a person comes on and off. Thinking that same sort of framework of what is the frequency in which the list would be updated, and how can we be protective of any impacts to infrastructure and funding associated with that, so that the minimum list allows the pro to operate with the goals and the metrics it puts forth in its plan, but aren't putting the cart before the horse in those sorts of situations as well. We know it takes time for not just infrastructure to have funding to be upgraded, but also that products need time to be redesigned to meet those standards as well. So we want to make sure we're incorporating that in these lists, and how that list refresh may be impacted to align with those. And then again, on the alternative collections that are organized specifically by the producer responsibility, and how that list integrates. And I know you can't come off mute, but hopefully I've addressed that. Martha, did you want to come off and speak, Martha?
Sorry, say again?
Did you want to read your comment?
Oh, yeah, I was just saying, I remember long ago we were talking about, putting the bill together, even there was discussion about different examples of how the advisory councils work in different states, and we don't have anything really in writing about when we report a recommendation. So far, we just said it's the majority. Well, that depends on who you allow to be on the advisory council. It seems to me there would be room. There's so much experience for both majority and minority views to be expressed. That would be probably the most useful thing, rather than up and down votes on the majority of the council. So I'm just trying to figure out when in this regulation process is the right time to bring that up.
So there is a process, and this was already posted in the Small Business Council for the not the Small Business Council, but the Small Business Public Comment Period, and then we're having a second public comment period. So if you want an official response from the agency, we highly recommend that you provide written public comments on that. So so that, again, you're getting an official response from us, and then we would take those into consideration.
So that's the round one. That's for round one regulations, not
Round one. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, I just want to make sure it didn't miss the vote. Thank you.
We do have aspects on the advisory council in round one.
Okay, thank you.
And Martha, to address your question relative to the development of the regulations associated with round one regs, when we had those questions, we were asking what are people's thoughts about, should we move on from this? Should we not move on from this? While there was there's still no official framework, but while we had that framework, we don't have that framework at that time. The transparency in that is that we were recording that when we were taking the notes, and we were asking folks, like, what are your thoughts? We were counting the number of people who were participating and who those people were from the advisory council, to ensure that we had at least a majority as far as the total number of persons on the advisory council reaching that threshold of participation. Is that, Bradley, is that your remembrance on that?
Yeah. Because sometimes it says that we need 2 people, or there's an or an and in some of the sections. So then the question was, do we need 1 person or 2 person for this particular seat? So those were some of the things that we were wrangling with, at least in the first round.
Oh, I'm sorry, Bradley. I wasn't referring to the actual regulations. I was referring to when we were having discussions on regulations in the first, like developing the regulations. So like when, for example, we would make a suggestion or recommendation. We were checking to see how many participants there were in the advisory council that were in attendance at the meeting to make sure we had like enough of a quorum of individuals that were in attendance.
Yes, yes.
So that, yes, I'm sorry.
Yes, and that was something that, because I remember there were some dates where we didn't have enough folks, and we didn't, I mean, we still had discussions, but we didn't necessarily vote. So, yeah, thank you for the clarification.
Right. My thought was just that there should be an opportunity not just to vote something up or down, but to explain. I mean, there are a lot of things that might have an environmental consequence, for example, but on a straight vote, it fails. But doesn't MDE want to know what those different views are and what's behind them? And so I just wanted to come up with some kind of rules of procedure that allow the council to express more than one opinion for the record. Even if you decide not to go along with it, at least you have it documented what issues were raised. That was and I just wanted to make sure we didn't miss the boat in terms of sending our comments on that.
That's a really great inquiry, and I definitely would recommend to express that during the 30-day public comment period, because it does slightly impact the regulatory process. And if you would like the official response and consideration, like official with a response back, that would happen during the 30-day public comment period. And I think also, Martha, to be honest, in the respect of, we've received a lot of feedback in the development of, and we've been, and I think this is going back to what Sarah had shared here on the stakeholder written comments. We did get quite a few. We shared them in full transparency. They're up on the website. And so we want to make sure that those opinions and views are still eligible and available to those who maybe did not participate in the first regulatory development process.
Right. Thank you.
I'd just like to highlight a comment that Vanessa left. You asked if the curbside list meeting is where definitions may be discussed. Would you mind elaborating on that a little bit?
Sure. Are y'all able to hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome. Yeah, I was just wondering if, 'cause one of the things that we're just like keeping an eye on is definitions, and so we wanted to know if this is something where we should kind of prep some things that we wanted to express to the group, if we had the opportunity, or if the intention is really just kind of restricted to the, like, what is curbside, and not necessarily some of the kind of definitions that would be implicated in that.
Yeah, so I think, and Shannon, feel free to jump in as well, but I think the focus of that conversation is going to be around the regulatory framework around how the curbside list is posted and implemented and things like that, and less so about the content of the list. If there are definitions that, like, if you have comments about definitions that are within the statute or things like that, those might be most appropriate to also go through the 30-day public comment period, just to make sure that those are addressed. That would be my recommendation.
And Vanessa, I'll also comment on, I'll completely agree with what Sarah was saying, but I also want to say, if there was a definition that you think there should be added to potentially this next iteration of round 2, specifically as it aligns with curbside lists, right? Like curbside, right? Like, let's just say we went along and defined the term curbside. That would be something that would be up for discussion, and we would love to hear feedback on that during that meeting, because that is not something that is currently in the definitions that we have for Regulation 1, and it also is not something that is statutorily defined right now in 92501. And so I do think that those specific things may be useful and helpful. Things that are defined in statute or potentially in regulation 1 that could be amended, maybe to expand on certain things, you can certainly suggest those during that time frame. We might not be able to respond to them. And if it was specific to its impact to the first round of regulations, we would also highly recommend, if you would like to amend them with specificity, to include that in the 30-day public comment period. Is that
Perfect.
answering your question, Vanessa, or is there more to that?
No, that's great. Thanks.
And then I also want to highlight your question, Matt. You asked if we can go over what materials are covered that originate from businesses, specifically in beverage containers, and what the process or next steps are. And so I would also direct you to the upcoming 30-day public comment period, as that is part of a previous conversation that those first round of regulations are focused on. So I think it would be great to have your feedback included. And in line with that, Mark asked if we can share the dates for the public comment period. And speaking for myself, I think I don't have those dates yet. Shannon, this is a great slide to pull up. So I think that
we don't
that will be shared. Yeah, it's not
official. And this is this is one of those things where MDE is also putting this rock in the hard place, as in, right, as soon as it hits, right? And we will provide as much update on that as possible. But this is being done through a different state agency. And until they tell us officially, we don't have that to be provided officially. So it's kind of one of those situations, we can't open that can unless we're given the opener for it. Bradley, I don't know if you want to add anything else on that.
Yeah, and one thing that we're trying to work with, and this was in one of our meetings, I think it was our first meeting right after legislative session, CAA gave a presentation on their timeline, and they had a Gantt chart where they were talking about things to help them with their registration process. They had identified some milestones that would be helpful for them to meet those. So we tried to work back in our schedule and understanding those constraints that CAA had. Like, for example, the big one is they have to build their database. It just doesn't happen in like a day or two. There's a lot of requirements gathering that has to happen. They have to know what the list is, which having the regulations is helpful for that. So that's a pretty strong, a hard milestone in the process. So we're doing something similar with this, is trying to understand what the hard dependencies are and which ones are a little bit more flexible. And that's a lot of that has to do with understanding CAA's ability to draft, like how long it takes to draft a plan as well, because they have some good experience in other states with that. So they have a pretty good idea on how long it takes to do that, and how many. I can't remember. I think there's like at least 2,000 producers out there, and maybe Peter wants to at least as like a prelim list. This might be a good time for Peter to jump in. So there's obviously lots of feedback that the pro is getting in their development of the plan as well. So we're trying to, again, understand what those hard milestones are and work this schedule into those, or to take into consideration what those harder milestones are.
And I see there's some more comments in here regarding the phase 1 regulations available for review, and if you missed any of them. And so I would like to move on to this resource, which we will publish for you. But I think that some of the questions we sometimes get asked, we want to make sure we provide it. So We've got the links to the other states in here so that you can take a look at what other states have done up until this point and any of their meetings to see if there's anything that is interest of you or you would like to review to see how they've gone over that. Specific to Maryland, the small business sign up. We want to make sure you all have the link in case you were not made aware of it the first time around. There is a process. It is not this regulation and I'm sorry, this authority is not under the Department of the Environment. It is under the state government authority. And so I do want to make sure you are aware of it. It's on an MD website, how you sign up for it for air, land, and water. And that's where the information is published. That was for the 15-day public comment period. When the regulations become live, they will be posted on the Maryland Register, and that is all the way down the bottom here. But if you wanted to take a look at the statutes that govern the development of this law in its first place, we put a link in here to the environmental article. This particular law starts in 92501 and it continues all the way through. If you use the website, you can just simply move along. Up on the top, there's a next button that you can just continue looking through until you get to the next chapter within this. So please definitely take a look at that. We've also linked to any of the archive meetings and then the needs assessment, which was published in 2025. And I hope that answers those questions. And Eric, you did ask a question here. It said, is the curbside list meeting where the pro-organized alternative collection programs will be discussed? And to go back again, and I'm sorry I'm making everyone dizzy by going back and forth on these slides, what we were intending under the minimum curbside list was to kind of review these topics, maybe some more. We will provide an updated agenda. Just wanted to give you a heads up as to our discussions. We wanted to provide everyone time to develop their thoughts and processes in here. And so that will be most of the intentional leadings here. But again, as we were talking about with Justin earlier, curbside compostable is going to be something that would be part of this list. And so we may be going over some of those topics as well. So not to set this, not handcuffed to this list here, but we just wanted to set a framework so you all understand kind of where we were proceeding and where we'd love to get your feedback on. We have 7 minutes before our time is up. Is there any other public comments that if you'd like to raise your hand or provide notes, we're happy to address them. Go ahead, Peter.
Hi, yeah. Sorry, I was just confused. I didn't see the links for live. Is there a way to, again, access the phase 1 regulations available for small businesses and nonprofits?
So I'm going to come back to, Peter, I'm going to come back to this right here. So when the process for developing regulation, how it moves is that we have this collection development stage where we initially go through the development of draft proposed regulations. Once we have gotten to the point where our Attorney General has reviewed it, we then submit it publicly online for a period of 15 days for small business review. Once that small business review period ends, we take them all offline so that we can prepare them and make any changes as necessary based on those feedbacks within that AELR review period. And then again, it will potentially get bounced out to our Attorney General for their review as well. So there's like a bit of a cycle here, right? Over and over again until we get to that point. Once the AELR gives approval, they'll allow us to publish a notice into the Maryland Register. Once it's published in the Maryland Register, then it goes to a 30-day public comment period. So we right now are in this mixture period waiting for that to happen. And once we are notified of that, then we can receive those public comments, regardless whether you're a small business, nonprofit, anyone. This is a public comment period. And so we welcome all those discussions. So right now there's nothing published on our website. And is it not out right now? We're waiting for that to come around. Go ahead, Brad.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I just wanted to go back to the curbside list. As Shannon had mentioned, maybe possibly some other things that we could include. And when she started the conversation, maybe defining curbside would be helpful. I do want to point out too that in developing the curbside, we may consider the following criteria, and there's a list of, I think, 9 things in there. And one of the things that we've been asked a question about is the curbside list what's currently curbsideable, if that's a word, or does it consider what could be curbside eligible in the future? And there is a projected future conditions for the criteria, and there's a list of different criteria, including like in markets and stuff like that. So is it what can be on the curbside list in the future? Is it the current state? Is it a combination of both? So those may be some things that we want to discuss as well, because this is a big Venn diagram of what the MRFs can handle right now. And really are we just looking at the intersections, or are we looking at also at the whole universe as well?
Well, I think Sarah, Brad, I think we can give people back like 3 minutes of their life on a Friday afternoon. If you're okay with that, if there's any other public comments, we don't want to cut this too soon, but we also could give you 3 minutes of your life back. Okay, well, with that, we really appreciate everyone. Oh, no, go ahead, Tiffany. You need to. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was looking for the high five button and I couldn't find it. So no questions. Goodbye.
Well, with that, we wanted to say thank you all so much for coming today. We will post this on our website as soon as we get the go ahead from our communications program, but it will go up very shortly. And with that, we'll have all the resources and links embedded into the PDF, so you'll have access to it. Again, we look forward to seeing most of you, if not all of you, back again February 10th from 9 to 11 a.m. for active engaged discussion. Again, we'll try to send out a reminder on that ahead of time, but thank you all. Have a lovely Friday afternoon. I hope you dig out from wherever you are and enjoy some sunshine this weekend.